Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Paging America, where we explore the power, profit, and politics shaping American healthcare and what you can do about it. I'm your host, Miles Baker, along with Dr. Rob Davidson. How you doing today, Rob?
Doing okay, Miles. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We have a long work day ahead of us, but we're grinding out
Yeah,
some content this morning, so that's fun.
yeah.
Um,
You know me,
yeah,
I work weird hours. So I worked last night or into the wee hours of the morning got home around 2 a.m. So again, working on like a pot of coffee here, but I feel like
yeah,
that's when my brain is at its finest. Maybe that used to be. I don't know. We'll just see how it goes. Let
yeah,
the listeners decide.
yeah. You were in the air till 2,
Yeah, it's about 1 a.m. I got home around
1
2
a.m.
a.m. So
Okay.
yeah, you know what's crazy? Like it's summer now, right? School's
Yeah.
out.
Right.
And summer is just different in the air. People are just out
Right.
being silly, doing
Hurting
weird
them.
things. Well, and it's also the case, and I've said this many times, almost to
Yeah.
myself and sometimes to a person sitting next to me. But my partner said the other day, he said, something's going on with gravity around here. And I look at he like sounded very earnest. I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Everyone keeps falling. And it is like true. Like it some days it feels like the gravitational pull in my little rural county is just different than anywhere else because everybody just is ending up on the ground. Like people driving their riding mowers off of 5 foot retaining walls, people tripping on any number of lawn implements. And then, like people literally, sorry, just get into the medical. You said, "What happened? I fell. How'd you fall? I don't know. I just fell. I
Yeah.
just fell." You're like, okay, cool, and then you deal with whatever the trauma. You try to make sure they didn't fall for some reason that you have to figure out, like they
Yeah.
passed out or whatever. But some days it must
It's
be
just
something about gravity. Yeah,
a little more good. Rob, I've read about how, and obviously I live in Chicago, like the crime rate goes up in the summer. Obviously, like there's more visits to the ER generally on like all topics, right, in the summer than there
yeah,
are in the winter.
yeah.
Do you
Except for like
get,
flu season, right? Flu season
yeah,
in the
yeah.
winter will get you, but like yeah, summer volumes are just higher.
Is there any truth to like full moons where
Yeah.
really?
Sure. I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious.
Yeah.
But no, someone did a study. They did a study actually not far from here in a big hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan, looking at volumes and kind of complaints and presentations. There was definitely a correlation. Now, correlation did not equal causation, but there was a
Sure.
correlation. The other thing that I
Interesting.
do believe is if you say have a slow night or have a quiet night, that it will be the
Yeah.
opposite. So when patients say that, I'm like, don't say that. Say pleasant or something. Yeah, there's so much superstition. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you wheel in the code cart when someone isn't coding to ward off evil spirits. I mean, we all know this and we all do it and we all will swear by it, but we'll never be able to prove any of it.
That's
Evidence-based
amazing.
medicine with a little bit of voodoo
With a
magic in
little,
there.
little.
Yeah, it's okay.
Great. We have a great show for you today. We have a tremendous guest, Katie Keith. She's going to be joining us on the back half of the show. So she's here as an expert in EMTALA and is going to explain to us the ins and outs of what's happening with the Trump administration and where we're headed in the courts. So do stick around for that. Learn quite a bit. I really enjoyed that interview, and it'll be coming
Yeah.
up on the back half. But we got a lot to get into. We got quite a few topics to cover. We're going to be looking at the ongoing Medicaid fight, RFK doing a clean sweep of ASIP, and an incredible quote by Dr. Oz. So stick with us here. We got a good show. Rob, let's start with Medicaid. So we're in the throes of this Medicaid fight. Obviously, there seems to not be great news coming out of the Senate in terms of progress, although the story changes every day. The latest CBO analysis puts the number at 16 million people who would be thrown off the rolls. However, not all of it is from the reconciliation bill. Some of it is from cuts to the ACA marketplace, which are from the GOP bill, as well as the failure to extend the premium subsidies for marketplace policies, which hasn't happened yet, but probably will. They expire at the end of the year unless Congress extends them, and it looks like they're planning on not extending them. The
Right.
7.8 million people would become uninsured due to the Medicaid cuts. 4 million people would become uninsured due to the marketplace cuts. And an additional 4.2 million people would lose marketplace coverage because the legislation fails to extend the premium tax credit enhancements. So an all-in tossing of 16 million people from the healthcare rolls.
Right. And for some people, like when you get rid of those premium subsidies, the premium tax credits, so you have the 4.2 that they estimate will lose insurance. And then there's another untold numbers of millions of people who will maintain insurance, but will just pay more,
Yeah,
for the same
right,
coverage, right? Same deductible,
right,
same copays, same everything, but the
right,
premiums will cost more. Like, I mean, it's a tax race, right? They're raising taxes, or
right,
they will, right? If they don't do this, and they haven't put it in the big beautiful bill, so called, and
yeah,
they haven't specifically mentioned they're doing it unless there's some secret plan that no one's talking about. But yeah, it
right.
seems like that's a big number, 16 million people.
16 million
Like
is a
that's
big number of
crazy,
people.
So anyway, yeah, these numbers keep going up, and it's because the more they look under the hood, the more terrible this bill looks, and the more terrible their plans look.
Yeah, for healthcare. It's even like, it strikes me that it's like, whenever we think of like the GOP as like the pro business party, it's like the absolute biggest business, because so many small businesses and nonprofit entities and sort of you name it, who don't have a workforce big enough to get plans for everybody, will do reimbursements on the Obamacare marketplace for their staff.
Right.
And so you think about those prices going up, and that's sort of like a broad-based hit to the bottom lines of small businesses across the country, which is also sort of another downstream effect of what they're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, I mean, the American dream, right, of entrepreneurship and starting your own business. I mean, this stifles that, right? If you take away the ability for people to actually purchase affordable insurance or make it more expensive, fewer people are going to be willing to leave if they do have those jobs. And we've seen Senator Lankford said it, and we've seen other senators say this. Well, we're not kicking people off Medicaid. We're moving them to employment-based insurance and marketplace insurance. So it's like, okay, are you going to now make sure that they get employer insurance? Or I think I mentioned before, my wife has an MA that works with her, who has, quote, good insurance. She has good insurance, but she broke her foot and had to get a job waiting tables on the weekends to pay for all of the associated copays and deductibles to get surgery on their foot. They're trying to sort of inoculate themselves against the criticism that is rightly coming their way by suggesting, well, this is just moving people around. We're giving them different insurance. It's like, well, no, you're not, because you're actually cutting that too and making that more expensive. But yeah, I mean, I guess stay tuned. We'll see what the Senate decides to send back to the House. We got quite a process that still has to unfold.
Yeah, hopefully they do lower the Medicaid cuts. I'm not holding my breath, but one of the latest things I read showed that they were possibly, they still want to throw people off healthcare, but maybe throw a few less off. If it stays at the current levels, Natasha Sarin at the Washington Post writes that the loss of insurance from the reconciliation bill could mean more than 100,000 deaths over a long enough time horizon. It's like an incredible stat. Imagine what we do if like a foreign actor caused 100,000 American deaths. It would be, it would
start a war, right?
Yeah, it would start like a world war. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Also, we have Russell Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, and the like super villain inside of the Trump administration recently.
He's like Project 2025 guy.
Yeah,
right?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Sort of, author/architect.
Said with a straight face, no one will lose coverage as a result of this bill. So you just basically, the OMB is just politicized at this point. Like there is not good sound information coming out of the OMB, which is a bummer for good governance.
Right. And just to have real conversations. I mean, it used to be you could just have these real discussions, right? Back when George Bush, when they authorized Medicare Part D, there were real discussions. Should we negotiate drug prices or not? And pharma won, and they didn't, right? And the Biden administration last time around, got that part into Medicare, so negotiating some drug prices. Used to be you could like literally talk about these things and have some basic truth and then decide whether that truth fit with your ideology or your policy preferences. Now they just lie. They just lie. So I guess we have to keep the truth coming out across any channels we can, advocates and other folks alike.
Absolutely. In other news, we got new EMTALA guidance out of the Trump administration. On June 3rd, the Trump administration announced that it was rescinding a Biden-era guidance governing the use of abortion in emergency situations covered under EMTALA. The guidance was originally created in 2022. Following the demise of Roe v. Wade, it was intended to give physicians a more clear path forward when making choices about whether or not to perform an abortion in the case of a medical emergency. EMTALA is the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. Just to get a little bit into the history, because I think it's interesting, the U.S. Congress passed EMTALA in 1986 after physicians in Chicago's Cook County Hospital exposed the pervasiveness of patient dumping, a practice in which hospitals refuse emergency services when patients cannot afford them. At the time, dumping doubled the risk of death and reduced the quality of medical care provided, especially for people of color and unemployed individuals. Increased awareness of patient dumping and its consequences, as well as the increased federal government involvement in healthcare generally, led to the passage of EMTALA after Chicago physicians organized and sort of brought it to light. I have never been a conscious person in the world, born in 1985, who've lived in a world where EMTALA was not the law of the land and wasn't broadly applicable, including on reproductive healthcare issues. But maybe you can speak to a little bit more, Rob. What is EMTALA? What does this all mean to you? Yeah.
I mean, I certainly was conscious when it happened because I was 15 years old when EMTALA
Yeah.
passed, and I had really severe asthma. So I was brought to the ER many times as a young child and as an early teen, and I had no idea. I remember, I remember my mom driving me across Metro Detroit to the hospital where we usually went, and I don't know what fostered that decision. You know, we at times had insurance and didn't have insurance when I was a kid, but I've been a doctor only, in the time that EMTALA has been the law of the land since 1998. I interact with EMTALA every single day. EMTALA, I mean, sometimes from emergency docs and hospitals gets a bit of a bad rap because it's an unfunded mandate. It says you have to see these folks, you have to provide stabilizing care, provide a screening exam for people having an emergency or people in active labor. I love EMTALA. It's one of the parts of my job that makes me glad that I chose to do what I do because I am required to, and I get to sort of treat anyone. We're the ultimate safety net, right? They're trying to strip away the safety net of Medicaid and now probably a little bit of Medicare, decreasing some spending on Medicare with this big, beautiful bill that they're trying to pass. It looks like now they're trying to undermine EMTALA, right? And I don't know if there's a slippery slope for this, what other medical conditions they could try to undermine
Right.
from EMTALA. And let's be clear, like when it comes to reproductive healthcare, reproductive rights, like I know you are absolutely pro women getting to decide when they want to have a family, right? And make that choice. These are not cases where that is what's happening, right? These
Right.
are largely cases where women and their families want to have a family, want to have a baby eventually, and they have a medical emergency. Frequently, it's severe hemorrhage, frequently very early on in pregnancy. And if they are hemorrhaging and losing that fetus, but there still happens to be a heartbeat, and cases in states with extreme abortion laws, Texas, Idaho, I don't know all the ones, but in such states, doing routine medical care to save the life or future fertility or prevent blood transfusions and major morbidity in those pregnant women, that is emergency care. That's under EMTALA, without a doubt. Guidance or no guidance, that falls under EMTALA. EMTALA put that in the original bill. We'll find out from Katie, and we'll get more info on this. But again, just to think that they're now going to try to just make this murky and create some chaos, it just goes along with that chaos and confusion and incompetence of every aspect of this administration. And they're
Yeah.
introducing it into our exam rooms in the ER, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into a deep dive on EMTALA with Katie on the
Yeah,
back half of the show. But yeah, it's an interesting development. We'll see where it goes.
for sure.
The news keeps coming. I'm gonna just
Mm,
keep moving through it here, so folks get an update. Dr. Mehmet Oz made news
mm,
this week for being a jerk. I just want to say before I give his quote,
yeah.
he's like RFK's a villain in my mind. There's like plenty of villains in the Trump administration. People who are really like pursuing like an ideological project that is bad as a general matter, bad for lots of people.
Right.
Oz always strikes me as like the like kind of a hanger oner. Like he's such a huckster. You know,
He's a
he's
grifter, right? He's in it
yeah,
for the
he's such a
grift, it would
grifter.
seem.
And it's so obvious. It's like
And
not
the
even a
crudité.
sophisticated. Yeah, yeah, the crudité. But it's such an obvious grift to me that it's
Yeah,
that
yeah,
he's at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services seems amazing.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
so
yeah.
so Dr. Oz this week is in an interview on Fox Business said that people needing Medicaid who don't want to comply with the new work requirements needs to quote prove that they matter. Why don't we just slice in his we'll splice in his quote here.
We have twice as many jobs as there are people looking for them.
Hmm.
Go out there, do the entry-level jobs, get into the workforce, prove that you matter, get agency into your own life.
Okay, so that's what he said.
Yeah,
What's incredible to me is that that's like not even the Republican position. That is the actual Republican position, but no one says that out loud because
right,
it's so gross. It's such a wild thing to say out loud.
right.
And that he would say the quiet part out loud is incredible. We all know that like work requirements is essentially like the is a big state move to create paperwork, hurdles, and administrative burden for the
Yeah,
people who are least likely to get healthcare anyway, just making it harder. And so it's a way to throw people off the rolls without saying that you're trying to throw people off the rolls by
right.
setting up this enormous administrative burden. But saying that you need to prove that you matter is really an incredible giveaway of the game.
Yeah. I mean, let's just make it clear. The hosts of this podcast position on this is that everybody matters, right?
Yeah.
People
Right.
matter just intrinsically,
Yeah.
and that people deserve affordable health care. just
Yeah.
by being alive on this earth. And so that this guy, right, this grifter, this multimillionaire who made, right, at one point, this guy was supposedly a very good cardiac surgeon, right? We're told that's great. And then, he got an Oprah, and then he got a show, and then he started, kind of pushing weird supplements and selling private Medicare Advantage plans and making money off of that. And then, like you said, got in as a hanger-on grifter into this very bizarre, like has
Yeah.
nothing to do with anything in his background running CMS. In
Right.
fact, probably should be like there should be a exclusion for people who have made money off of privatized Medicare.
An extraordinary conflict of interest, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Here we are again, right? We're like one conflict of interest away from
Right.
unraveling the whole thing, right? But yeah, that this guy, right? He doesn't need a health insurance. He can just go pay for whatever, right? Because he's made so much money selling like cranberry capsule. I don't know. I forget all the stuff this guy has tried to sell. Unproven medical, quote treatments. It's gross. I mean, I think you said it right. Like that's the appropriate term. And I think just got to make sure people hear that this is really what they think about
Yeah.
folks that are on Medicaid, is that they don't matter. They're willing to kick 16 million people off of healthcare because they don't matter. The people that matter are the billionaires for whom they're passing massive tax cuts. That's why they're doing
Yeah.
all of this.
Dr. Oz, you should have to prove that you matter because we don't think very highly of you after this one.
No,
So
quite a hurdle he's going to have to overcome.
yeah, really, really a lot of ground to make up on. All right. And then we have some interesting news out of the AMA as it relates to the latest out of RFK. So I'm going to set this up by reading what happened at ACIP, the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and then the response by the American Medical Association. So on June 9th, 2025, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. abruptly dismissed all 17 members of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, also referred to frequently as ACIP. These were sent out the same day, citing alleged conflicts of interest. Oh man, here we go.
Here we go.
And accusing the committees of being a rubber stamp for pharmaceutical companies. The decision sparked widespread backlash from public health experts and the AMA and infectious disease specialists and anyone who's watching it and anyone who cares about vaccines, who warned it would undermine vaccination policies and public trust in vaccines. And so we had just like sort of just swept them away, and then almost immediately after assigned a whole new board. And this is in the lead up to the June ACIP meeting that's coming up. Anyway, what's your thoughts, Rob?
Right. Unprecedented is probably an overused word at this point. It truly is unprecedented, right? This guy with clear anti-vax views who's profited off of his anti-vax stances, kicking out a bunch of people who are, honestly there. And I'm not going to defend all 17 members. I don't know who all of them are. I don't know what kind of conflict of interest some of them may have had. It may be true. We're not gonna die on that hill. But to summarily dismiss all 17 people, it is, I would dare say, 100% true that not all of those 17 people had conflicts of interest that meant that they shouldn't be there, right? I don't have conflicts of interest. I get $0 from Big Pharma. I appreciate the fact that I don't have to do nearly as many spinal taps on infants as I used to because of the strep pneumo vaccine, because of the Haemophilus influenza vaccine. And until these people have had to do that and then seen a world in which they no longer have to do that, like literally think about like a 28-day-old little infant scrunching them in a little ball and sticking a needle in their back and seeing pus drain out of it. That is the reality that we get to avoid because of some of the vaccines that we're getting for these kids. Luckily, I didn't have to suffer through seeing kids with measles, seeing kids with polio. But if they want to go back to the days of iron lungs, that's the kind of thing they're shooting for here. And so unprecedented is true. And then he did announce some of the appointments a couple days later, I think on Wednesday this week. We're doing this on the 12th. It's either on the 10th or the 11th. He announced 8 of the replacements. Like, to be honest, not all of them on surface look like complete bonkers loons like RFK Jr. Some of them do. Some of them have extremely, worrisome stances. Dr. Robert W. Malone, noted kind of Joe Rogan guest, anti-vax conspiracist. He was actually involved in early mRNA vaccine research back in the 1980s, and then has come out against the COVID-19 vaccine. He said there was widespread hypnosis, likened vaccines to a form of AIDS, downplayed measles deaths, and then supporter of things like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin for treating COVID-19, which have been proven time and time again with peer-reviewed, randomized, controlled, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies to not be effective against this virus. These are different kind of medications. So he's been a longtime ally and voice on behalf of RFK Jr. and his views, and he's going to be on this. Another notable individual on here is someone named Vicky Pebsworth, PhD RN, and former research director for the National Vaccine Information Center, which sounds benign, right? Oh, information on vaccines, that's great. They're just a noted anti-vax organization that has been aligned with RFK Jr.'s Children's Health Defense Fund. And so, yeah, a sampling of some of the people that are going to be on there. It's definitely a little scary, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll see. We got to keep an eye on this. I don't know if this is the entirety of ASIP under RFK Jr. It's a smaller number than the previous, but I guess we'll see what's coming. But definitely kind of nerve-wracking times for those of us who would rather not be sticking needles in little kids' backs all the time. That was not the most fun part of the job.
One of the things that's concerning to me is I was reading up on ASIP, and obviously I'm learning some of these things as we go. I think if you're physicians and other folks know a little bit more about these entities because you deal with them, but they can determine recommendations if insurance covers certain vaccines and others don't. So that's fascinating to me because you could get some really wild outcomes out of this. I made a joke that ASIP was going to start recommending ivermectin on the vaccine schedule, but that's like a joke, But it's
not a joke. No.
Is it?
No.
How bad can it get? We always think we're at the bottom and we never can get there.
Well, that's just it. They're saying, well, we're not going to get rid of vaccines. That's what RFK Jr. said, right? But if you have a panel that stops recommending MMR and insurance companies then get to say, well, under the ACA, you tell us we have to cover, basic preventative services, but this is no longer recommended by the federal government. CDC is not recommending this, right? This panel. So we're not going to pay for that. Well, I mean, how many people, like low-income people who are struggling to pay the bills, are going to be, forking out of their pockets to pay for MMR vaccines, right? With all the disinformation. I mean, it's hard enough for us to battle the disinformation at the bedside and talk to parents about why these vaccines are so important. Then to say, okay, and by the way, that's going to be $50 or $100 to then also get it. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So this has real ramifications. We'll see. We'll see where it goes, but it doesn't sound great here in the first few days of this all going down.
Yeah.
And now, so interestingly, big major body, I think you want to get into this, the AMA. Maybe you can read for us exactly what the AMA has said, because they finally seem to be maybe growing some kind of a spine, pushing back against clear anti-health choices by this administration. What do they say?
So fingers crossed. Less than 24 hours after Kennedy announced that HHS had removed all of the CDC's vaccine advisors, the American Medical Association, also known as the AMA, their delegates passed an emergency resolution urging Kennedy to reverse this move during their annual meeting. The delegates also directed AMA leadership to send a letter to the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension, also known as the HELP Committee, requesting an investigation into the firings. The resolution also called for the AMA to, quote, initiate sustained public advocacy in support of the current ASIP structure, including its liaison representatives, and to, quote, identify and evaluate alternative evidence-based vaccine advisory structures and invest resources in such initiatives as necessary. Seems good.
Yeah, that seems really good. I mean, we've been advocating for this all along. We've been mobilizing people to do this. Hey, welcome to the party, AMA. You're welcome to join. It's a big table, big tent.
Just for some background for folks, Rob and I were big critics of the AMA and a number of the specialty organizations, and some not speaking
kind of almost all of them, right?
Almost all of them, not being brave, not speaking out when Kennedy was nominated, even though to anyone who had ever read a newspaper, Kennedy was a clear and present danger to public health. That wasn't a question. The track record was long enough. There was no question about it. And you didn't see trade associations that represent physicians, some of the other big sort of slightly less political, but sort of health oriented folks. People weren't sort of speaking out. And then if people remember, that was in that period right at the beginning of the Trump administration when people were really really buttoned up. They were really being quite quiet. Meanwhile, at the Committee to Protect Healthcare, we were organizing doctors to try to sink the nomination. We were pretty crabby that the AMA and others were not using, our little nonprofit that we work at.
Yeah.
We have some reach, but the AMA is $1 billion with a B dollars. They have some real heft that they can put in the fight. But well, here's what I'm going to say: it's never too late to do the right thing. So welcome AMA. Welcome to the resistance.
I'm honestly rethinking my decision to not be a member of the AMA. I was briefly at one point early in my career, and then honestly recognized most of what they do is advocate for doctors' paychecks.
Right.
Reimbursement. That's just true. And most of the professional organizations, that's a big part of what they do.
Yep.
But extremely grateful because they recognize in order for us to have like careers that are meaningful and not getting burned out and not just wanting to get the hell out of doing this job.
Yeah.
We really do need a public health apparatus that supports the work we're trying to do at the bedside.
Yeah.
It's funny that it took this one particular action to get them to grow a spine. I don't know. I mean, I think it's been building up, right? Drip, drip, drip.
Yeah.
And then this was kind of the final straw, maybe.
I think that's right. Well, and it sounds like it coincided with the national delegates meeting. So there was like, depending on how I'm not as familiar with the decision-making structure inside of the AMA, but if it works like other delegate meetings for other organizations, they were probably there and could do something about it rather than call an emergency meeting. So, and let me just say this. I want to applaud the AMA. I want to applaud even more so the physicians that took an activist stance inside the AMA for the institution to reach this conclusion. Because just like any membership organization, it takes pushing up. And sometimes the leaders of these enormous institutions just have a lot of rules around their decision making. And you probably had a lot of folks in there that wanted to do something like this, but they didn't necessarily think that they had the backing of the full membership, which we find time and time again, right? With a lot of the trade associations, particularly during the abortion ballot fights, some of the trade associations have been reluctant to endorse what is clear and obvious medicine because of their conservative members within their institution. So kudos to the docs inside the AMA that pushed up and insisted on this. I would say that calling for an investigation.
That's kind of something.
Hey,
if they want to talk, like, give me a call. My email's out there. It's easy to find me. Like, I'm happy to talk because we have been mobilizing doctors and advocacy for policies that makes, these public health policies that are based in science and protect patients. If they want to, get involved and do that as well. We got some thoughts. We got some ideas. Would love to collaborate with whomever wants to do the right thing as they're starting to do.
All right. Okay. So thumbs up to the doctors inside the AMA pushing up. Thumbs up to the AMA. Your flowers.
Yeah. And thumbs up to Miles Baker for learning on the fly so much of the stuff that you didn't know before. And I think you're doing okay.
Yeah. Honestly, Rob, I think like one of the ways I was thinking about these membership organizations is they're not dissimilar. For folks who are new to the show, I come out of a background inside of the labor movement, and unions just like any membership organization. Activist strains inside of a membership organization can move mountains inside of an institution that otherwise looks small C conservative. But if you get an animated clutch of people who can have a moral vision and care about those stances that their institution takes, people can make change inside of that. And I think the AMA being in this fight, and I hope they stick around, right? Like not just this one extremely provocative thing that RFK has done, but for the whole of pushing back against the administration. For whatever it's worth, I think it's becoming clear to people that there's no wheeling and dealing to be had here unless you're inside the like nucleus of the MAGA movement, right? That everyone else is going to get a turn in the barrel. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to like bargain away things like on the front end, because it's not going to save you, particularly in the healthcare space where they're so hostile to so many things that that prop up our institutions for care.
Absolutely. So we'll see, right? They put out a call to the Help Committee. Senator Cassidy, who's a physician, is the chair of the Help Committee. Senator Cassidy is a pro-vaccine member of the Republican Senate caucus. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. Maybe we'll actually have some oversight and have to have RK answer some real questions from not just people, in the opposite party, but from someone like Cassidy, who has some credibility within that kind of MAGA Maha world, simply just because of, what he's
Didn't
let them do previously.
didn't Dr. Senator Cassidy, who he voted for RFK, didn't
He
he
sure
say
did.
he
Yeah.
got that private
Yeah.
assurance that they weren't going
Yeah.
to mess with
Yeah.
vaccines?
hmm
Oh
hmm
my.
Yeah. I
We're
mean,
gonna
Susan
yeah.
Collins got assurances from Brett Kavanaugh that he was
Yeah.
never going to go back against Roe v. Wade. So
Yeah.
I think these folks need to be more clear-eyed when they
Yeah.
see, right, when they hear the
Right.
quack, they know it's a duck, and please don't just listen to what they're telling you in those private meetings.
I think they know better. They're just trying to,
Yeah,
wash their hands of it so they don't have
for
to take a
sure.
stand. All right. All right. So we're going to go on a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by Katie Keith to learn more about EMTALA and take a deep dive into where we're headed. All right, everyone, welcome back. Our guest today is Katie Keith. Katie Keith is the founding director of the Center for Health Policy and the Law at the O'Neill Institute, where she oversees the center's work on demystifying how the courts affect health policy, including access to coverage, affordability, transparency, and equity. Katie recently returned to the center after serving as deputy director of the first ever White House Gender Policy Council, where she spearheaded the Biden administration's efforts to defend reproductive rights, advance research on women's health, promote women's economic security, and end gender-based violence. Katie Keith, it's so good to have you. Welcome to the show. Today, we're going to get into, we talked about EMTALA a little bit at the top of the show. We're going to get into some of the specifics and where this conversation is headed. Katie, maybe we could start off with kind of a basic question for our listeners who are not as familiar. What is EMTALA?
Great question. So EMTALA stands for the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. This is a federal law that was passed by Congress in the 1980s, really to make sure that people were receiving emergency care and weren't being denied the care that they needed. The way that the law works is hospitals that receive funding through Medicare, which is most hospitals in the country, and have an emergency department, have to screen patients and offer what we call stabilizing treatment to anyone who walks through that emergency department door. Now, there's a long history here of why Congress enacted these protections, but one of the things a lot of people focus on is the idea that no one should face a wallet biopsy, which was a lot of patients were being screened for their ability to pay and turned away from care. You also had horrific stories of especially pregnant women being in the parking lot because they've been denied care through the emergency room. And so the idea is if you receive federal funds and you have an emergency department, you have an obligation to screen patients to see if they are facing an emergency medical condition. And if they are, to either offer stabilizing treatment or to transfer them as appropriate. So there's a lot of details in there. And I know your listeners are physicians who will know the ins and outs of the law much better than I do potentially, but at a high level, that's what the protections do.
I'll just say as an ER doc, I love EMTALA. It's one of my favorite parts of being an emergency physician because I can do on the advocacy side work for making healthcare affordable, but at least I know in my daily life, there is access, at least there is that level of access and the law ensures it. So it makes what we're talking about today really personal for me. But thanks for that.
Yeah.
So on June 3rd, the Trump administration announced that it was rescinding a Biden-era guidance governing the use of abortion in emergency situations. Katie, from your perspective, what does the revocation of the EMTALA guidance, what does it do?
And the revocation is quite significant to me in terms of it's one of the most significant things we've seen the Trump administration do so far on abortion access. And so, I think the practical impact of this, of course, is EMTALA remains the law of the land. President Trump and the administration cannot change existing law. EMTALA is still there for patients who need it, and hospitals will still have this obligation to offer stabilizing care, including to pregnant women who might need an abortion. But I think the revocation is just going to contribute to the chaos and confusion we've seen because of state abortion bans all across the country. And I might do a little bit of a step back too, and then circle back to the revocation if that's okay. I think this has been the case. I would say that I think the Biden administration would certainly say that EMTALA has required hospitals to offer abortion care as a stabilizing treatment in response to a wide variety of emergency medical conditions based on the, physician and healthcare workers on the ground determination. So examples are severe preeclampsia, PPROM. There's a whole host of conditions where an abortion or termination might be the appropriate stabilizing treatment for someone. I think that's been the case since EMTALA was enacted. And so I would emphasize really this is nothing new, but it was thrust into the spotlight after the Supreme Court overturned Dobbs. And frankly, even before that, there's been a lot of focus on the guidance that the Biden administration put out in 2022, right after the Dobbs decision on EMTALA. But frankly, the administration had done this guidance in September of 2021 after the Supreme Court allowed Texas to ban abortion after 6 weeks. And it was this understanding right away that there could be a conflict between these extremely narrow, dangerous, extreme abortion bans that barely allow doctors to provide life-saving treatment, let alone provide the sort of health-saving treatment that patients are entitled to under EMTALA. So it was even after the bounty hunter abortion law decision by the Supreme Court, where Texas had banned abortion at 6 weeks, that we first put out that guidance just to clarify, because it hadn't been an issue before, because you had the constitutional right to choose. And so after Dobbs, that guidance was sort of extended, nationwide. We re-upped it. And really the goal was to stand with patients and providers and try to offer some clarity that state abortion bans and state officials in many states refuse to provide about what might an emergency medical condition be, where abortion could be the stabilizing treatment, try to make clear that this is up to the individual physicians, not up to state law to decide when the care should be offered. And then, there were other aggressive things that the Biden administration did that maybe we could talk about, like suing the state of Idaho to clarify that, Idaho still has one of the strictest abortion bans in the country. And so the idea was to clarify that to the extent that abortion ban prevents doctors from providing care in emergency situations, that part of the abortion ban is preempted by EMTALA. And so the idea was federal law supersedes the very, very narrow parts of these abortion bans, and women everywhere should be entitled to the emergency care that they need, including when that care is abortion.
And you answered a question I was going to ask about superseding federal law. I mean, the normal course of how laws, I think back to Schoolhouse Rock, and signing the bills and all that, but if the federal government passes a law, it generally supersedes state law, right? So EMTALA from 86 should supersede any of these state bans that happened in the 30s or happened since Dobbs fell. Is that generally how we accept how laws work?
Not only is that true that is generally correct, EMTALA itself has an explicit, what we call a preemption provision. So Congress knew this potentially could be a conflict. And so even in EMTALA itself, it says this law directly preempts state laws that directly conflict with these requirements. And so that's why the Biden administration went to court with Idaho to get that clarified. And I would emphasize too, as we're talking about this, EMTALA offers incredibly important critical protections for patients. It is also an extremely narrow law. And so the fact, I think a little bit of the step back here is that this fight right now on EMTALA is literally about whether women can get life or health-saving care while actively miscarrying. This is not about even the broader fight. To me, this is such a important, critical issue that I can't believe we're fighting over this. This, to me, should be common sense that women in an emergency should get the care. They've seen an incredible amount of pushback from Idaho, from the state of Texas, and this went all the way up to the Supreme Court once. And now the Trump administration has revoked the guidance. And so, in doing so, they said, the 2021 guidance, the 2022 guidance, and then a letter that then Secretary Javier Becerra had sent to, hospital associations and doctors to try to, again, make these requirements clear so that women could get the care that they needed. In revoking that, the Trump administration issued a very short statement saying, this is no longer our policy. This conflicts with the policy of this administration. And so I think it will be on them to explain exactly what part of making sure women get emergency abortion care they disagree with.
Does this set up a situation where in states like Texas or Idaho or other states with more extreme abortion bans, where you could have hospitals interpreting their sort of EMTALA obligations differently within the state?
I think that is what is happening. And again, that was from the Biden administration perspective, that is what we were working to help with, to offer that clarity. And, I think there's been reporting on this that, some hospitals are doing a better job of providing internal guidance or have committees to talk through what kind of exceptions or what kind of clinical situations you might need to, be prepared to offer this care. But I think it is very ad hoc. And it goes back to the point of what state abortion bans are doing, right? They are designed to have a chilling effect. They are designed to scare doctors, to scare hospitals through criminal penalties, through civil penalties. And the idea is that the care should, we're going to make it so scary that no one ever provides this care. And that's what's happening. And I think, making it clear that EMTALA does require this, that there are obligations on hospitals at the federal level, that you can't just defer to the state abortion ban, was our goal. And I would acknowledge it's a very, very, very difficult position to put hospitals and doctors on the front lines in. And it's that, but that is the point of what these abortion bans are designed to.
Yeah, a colleague and friend of mine who's an ER doc in Wisconsin, Dr. Chris Ford, I think he put it really well, because one of the biggest scenarios we see is a pregnant woman comes in, typically first trimester, the fetus has a heartbeat. They are bleeding. They might be bleeding pretty severely. They might be bleeding to the point of requiring, blood transfusions and putting their health certainly, but also their lives at risk. And his take was, my first call should be to my OB colleague, not to a lawyer, right? And it feels like the chaos and confusion makes you wonder, which speed dial button am I supposed to hit first here, like to figure out how I'm supposed to take care of this patient. I mean, is that the point of it? I mean, sometimes it seems like the chaos is the feature, not the bug of this administration and so many policies, or is that just the nature of the incompetence of how they view these critical issues?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, and I could not agree more that the idea of practicing medicine while looking over your shoulder, especially in an emergency situation, seems so untenable. And we are seeing that in the outcomes for women put in these situations. And so there's, been incredible lawsuits all across the country brought by the Center for Reproductive Rights on behalf of women in this exact, in these types of situations. So PPROM, preeclampsia, fatal fetal anomalies. If you think about Amanda Zarowski, if you think about Kate Cox, some of the just women who have shared their really, really compelling stories about what has happened to them because of state abortion bans, women who were wanted to grow their families and were put in just impossible situations that risked their health and then ultimately their life, and having to wait until you get sepsis before you can get the standard of care should be, absolutely outrageous to anyone who sort of hears those stories. And yet this is the type of guidance that has been pulled back. And I think we'll continue to see, the story. Sadly, we'll continue to see the stories of women denied this care all across the country. Again, I emphasize the law is still there. Women should still be entitled to this. No one should, not seek the emergency treatment that they need. And hospitals do have this obligation. And I am deeply concerned that the state abortion.
Yeah. And on the ground, like a lot of these decisions we should be making in the moment, like with minutes to spare, right? If someone is hemorrhaging to that extent, we should be deciding, is this the time to evacuate the uterus and end that very early pregnancy? And even if you get to that decision eventually because the lawyers say, no, you're protected, EMTALA requires it, like that still could result in significant morbidity and mortality, just the hesitation.
And one thing that came up in the litigation over Idaho, for example, is early on, the district court had agreed with the Department of Justice and said, yes, the state abortion ban is too narrow, and so it is preempted by EMTALA. So if women enter an emergency room that receives Medicare funding, and the abortion ban prevents a doctor from taking action that they think is right to stabilize their care, that was put in place. At some point in a wild appellate process, the Supreme Court lifted that protection, and you saw this came up in the Supreme Court oral argument over this issue. Women were being airlifted from Idaho to Utah because of concerns about the abortion ban. So these are just real life impacts that can devastate families, that can raise healthcare costs, that is sort of fundamental basic medicine, I think, for a lot of folks who practice emergency medicine. Again, I am not a doctor, I'm a lawyer, but I think this is pretty basic stuff that was not controversial the many years that EMTALA has been in place, and you had the protections of Roe versus Wade. But here we are, and just seems very notable to me that, the Trump administration felt the need to pull back this policy. I think one thing that is important to note, too, is I don't think this is the last word from them on this. That short statement that they put out revoking the guidance that we've been discussing suggested there's more to come. They suggested there's a need to, I can't remember, clarify the confusion that the Biden administration created, which I'll be very interested to see what that is. But just to say, I think this is going to continue to be an issue to sadly watch and pay attention to for your listeners.
Katie, EMTALA, as it relates to emergency medicine in this way, and sort of in the states with abortion bans, it having sort of a immediate effect. It could have immediate effect with what the Trump administration is advising. Do we think there is a broader attack on EMTALA coming? So this is for care when an abortion is the necessary procedure. I think that some of the physicians that we talk to are worried that there could be sort of a broader assault on EMTALA, that now it's not just about reproductive care, where it's also talking about gunshot wounds or any other reason you might up in the emergency department.
Great question. I have not done enough thinking about sort of the other applications, but I think even on abortion, I do think there are ways this administration could try to weaponize EMTALA nationwide, not just in abortion ban states. And the reason I'm suggesting that is there was a proposal at the very end of the first Trump administration to impose new affirmative requirements on hospitals under EMTALA and under a different law, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So I do think this could be weaponized. I think EMTALA could be weaponized even on reproductive health care going forward. One reason is, the Trump administration, the last time around at the very end, put out some proposals that would have affirmatively required hospitals to take new steps in sort of the reproductive health care access space. And so I don't know if that proposal will come back. It was something that was called for explicitly in Project 2025, which does seem to be the playbook that they're using and implementing. So that's an issue to watch, but that would affect all states, including states where abortion remains lawful. The other thing that jumped out to me in the notice revoking the Biden era guidance is they seem to really focus, or at least included a reference to both emergency care for both a woman and the unborn child. And for those listening, I was using air quotes there. But so I don't know if they will attempt to put affirmative requirements to also stabilize a fetus or something. I'm not going to try to get into their mind, but I do think this will be an issue to watch, and requirements like that could really throw kind of a wrench in, certainly in the practice of medicine, but I think could especially be challenging for states where abortion remains lawful to understand what the federal obligations might mean.
Got it.
I just got to say, I really appreciate the work you did in the previous administration, like helping to work on this and clarified it and those clarifying statements, because I'm not easily offended by most things. This is so offensive that a political apparatus of the Trump administration, and this is, I don't think there's a legal angle here. This is all optics and politics and appealing to certain segments of a voting bloc, that they would dare to think that as docs we're out there trying to, either perform abortions or, end pregnancies in women. Like you said, these are people who want to expand their families. I can't tell you the number of people I've seen in my career who come in having a miscarriage, and maybe there's still a faint heartbeat. Normal heartbeats maybe in the 120s to 160s of the fetus, and it's maybe 70 or 80. And you have to tell them, boy, this is impending. Like, this is not going to work out. The hormone levels are dropping. We can provide you. You can go home and we can have you have this happen naturally, which happens most of the time, or the OB can take you to the operating room, because we are in a state where, having that heartbeat and declining hormone levels in a clearly non-viable pregnancy is still legal. It is gutting. It's gutting for the patients, their partners, their families, the doctors. We routinely are if not crying, because I'm just kind of a crusty old guy, but certainly having those very emotional moments with people, and that they will come in and kind of suggest, well, you are doing bad things and we're going to make sure you're doing right by these people. It's infuriating. So I appreciate you doing what you did before and then continuing to do this work at Georgetown.
The stories are devastating.
Yeah.
And we've heard from so many women who were in that situation, and their hospitals and doctors did not feel like they could really felt forced to wait until their health was so compromised before they could get, the standard of care in ways that has had repercussions for their health going forward. So sort of insult to injury, where maybe you now can't carry a child in the future because the care was not provided earlier. I do want to recognize, I think things were, even with our guidance, and we did a ton of other things on EMTALA, I think it was really important to us to educate patients and providers about their rights. We did a lot of technical assistance. There were investigations, there was enforcement action, even created new signage where you could, use your phone and do a QR code to go right to the complaint. We recognize that not everybody knows about their rights here or their obligations, frankly. And so we did try to improve that, not just for, pregnant women and abortion, but for a whole host of other EMTALA reasons. Miles, as you mentioned, that people should know they have these rights. And we even created a new federal complaint system. Previously, if you were denied care, or if you see someone who is denied care, you could file a complaint with the state. And I think we had a real recognition that everybody might be comfortable doing that, especially in a state with an abortion ban. And so we created a really new process for people to file a complaint directly with the federal government if they were denied care. And again, not just abortion care, but any kind of EMTALA complaint. And so tried to streamline the process and make it easy. So just to say it was an incredible focus. Whereas even so, I think that state abortion bans are so extreme and so dangerous that you still saw, people being denied care. And I think that is going to be just so much worse.
Yeah. Well, that's sobering, Katie.
Yeah.
So maybe just to look ahead, EMTALA is obviously top of mind because of the Trump administration's recent action. But as you look forward to the year ahead, are there other legal developments that could impact care or could have sort of an outsized impact on what doctors are thinking about or what healthcare advocates are thinking about? What does the future hold?
Well, staying on abortion access for 1 minute, and then I want to highlight a couple things that we're waiting on from the Supreme Court, which is it's that time of year. On medication abortion, this is also an issue that, I certainly worked on when I was in the Biden administration, but that is very much top of mind. Of course, medication abortion is the way that the majority of women, choose to terminate an early pregnancy. It's based on medication that's been approved by the Food and Drug Administration for nearly 25 years at this point. And yet we are spending a ton of time fighting about it in court and fighting about, access to a highly safe and effective medication. I'm watching closely what the Trump administration is going to do there too. Will they do something similar like what they just did in EMTALA by revoking some of the changes that the Biden administration did? Will they reopen a safety review, which it certainly seems like the FDA commissioner and Secretary Kennedy, groups that are opposed to abortion, who have put forth a new report that I wouldn't even call data. It's not peer reviewed, anything like that. But you're starting to see a push, I think, to revisit the way that medication is prescribed and regulated and managed, and there's an ongoing court case there too. So more to come on that, but I do think, listeners who care about these issues will want to be paying attention to the medication abortion fight as it continues. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it is Supreme Court time. There's a bunch of cases that matter, of course, but the two maybe to flag from my perspective for you all. One is called Kennedy versus Braidwood Management. This is a case that's been going on for 5 years. It's a challenge to the most popular provisions of the Affordable Care Act. Many people will be familiar with it, and it's been in place for about 15 years now. This is the requirement that you should be able to get free evidence-based preventive care through your private health insurance plan. And so more than 150 million Americans have benefited from this provision. So think your colonoscopy, free contraception, cancer screenings, all kinds of a long list of preventive services. We're waiting to see if the Supreme Court upholds that provision. I would say even if they do uphold that provision, it will be because they agree that the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services has a lot of authority to determine what the preventive services should be. And so as we are watching what Secretary Kennedy is doing with the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. That's one of the organizations that sets the standards for the preventive services that then have to be covered for free by your health insurance company. And so I think a decision that upholds this part of the Affordable Care Act could also embolden the Secretary even further. That will be an issue to continue to watch, in some ways hope that's the outcome, because I want people to continue to have, what is, I think is a really strong public health policy to get preventive services to people and incentivize them to get the early care that they need. And we will sort of see the level of potential interference, for political interference from the Secretary going forward. The second big case is called Medina versus Planned Parenthood. And this is a case over a dispute over whether South Carolina can exclude Planned Parenthood providers from its Medicaid program. This is also a longstanding case that goes back to actions taken by the South Carolina governor in 2018 that have sort of finally reached the Supreme Court. And so the court could say South Carolina is free to exclude Planned Parenthood. And the argument there, of course, is, the Medicaid program does not pay for abortion except in very limited circumstances. But the argument is, all money is fungible. And so for for reimbursing Planned Parenthood for contraception or maternal health or, a whole host of things that have nothing to do with abortion, that allows them to perform more abortions. And that is like our federal dollars are going towards that issue, which I think it could not be further from the case, but that is the argument that opponents are making. And so I think if the court sides with South Carolina here, you will see other states go this direction. Many states have long tried to exclude Planned Parenthood from the Medicaid program. Could be devastating for Planned Parenthood access. You could see clinics close, you could see service area reductions, it would be a loss. And, Planned Parenthood's all across the country serve many low-income women and families need. And so it could be even quite a blow. And my last point on that is, the Republicans in Congress are considering a provision in their big budget bill that would do that nationwide too. So you've got kind of a dual threat from the court. So even if everything is fine from the court, in this Medina case, you could see Congress, enact the same policy. So sorry, that was probably more than you wanted to know on those things, but that's what's on my mind this morning.
Super important. I have a good friend just north of me who I've met through advocacy who is alive because Planned Parenthood caught her cervical cancer, right? That was part of their, so much of what Planned Parenthood does, much more of what they do is not abortion care than is abortion care. So I think that is super important. And I didn't know that was coming down the pike. So I think, I guess we'll wait and see. I'm not super hopeful with the current court. What do you think? Like, if you could read the tea leaves, are you prognosticating, giving us odds?
Yeah, always a mistake. So you all can call me later and tell me I was wrong.
Okay.
I think I listened to oral argument in both the Braidwood case and the Medina case, and I do think there's a possibility that the Supreme Court rules narrowly to uphold both the preventive services requirement under the ACA, but also rejects what South Carolina was trying to do. There's a world in both cases where there's something squishy and it gets sent back down and the litigation continues. So it maybe won't be like a done and final and a clean win, if you will. But so there could be more to come, I think, across the board. But I will stay optimistic this morning. How's that? I hope that is where things land, and we're recording on the 12th, and we've got more decisions coming today, but presumably we'll have all these answered before the end of June.
Yeah. Is it too much to say that rooting for the Braidwood decision to come down on the side of preventive services was kind of like rooting for Elon Musk when he and Trump were feuding? Or no, is it like largely the Braidwood, a positive affirmative case would be, that's a win. It is a little scary, right? You get someone like RFK Jr. and his views on vaccines and other kind of kooky views he may hold that we haven't heard about yet. We're still rooting for it, right?
That Elon Musk question. but I think that's right. And, we're talking in terms of the authority. And so, so far you have not had a secretary under Obama, the first Trump administration, or the Biden administration sort of use that authority to interfere with the evidence-based recommendations that the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and the, Health Resources and Services Administration have made, right? All of those are expert bodies recommending, looking at the data, looking at the evidence, and making recommendations about what is high-quality preventive services that should be covered at no cost. We've not seen that interference before, and it does feel a little bit like a potential new world. I think better, I guess my perspective is it's better to have and keep the coverage, of course, and we want, that part of the Affordable Care Act to maintain. Again, super popular, been in place it went into effect, 6 months after the law was passed. So it's been around since 2010, and so many people have benefited from it, but it could be a bumpy ride. That's the outcome.
Stay tuned. Well, that seems like maybe a good place to end. Katie Keith, thank you so much for joining us. We know that you have recently published. We're going to toss that in the show notes. So if folks want to hear more from Katie, please find the show notes and check out the link. Thank you so much. We hope you come back as things develop throughout the year. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks for everything you all do, and to all those listening for your work on the front lines out there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, Rob, that was a great interview. I learned a ton that I didn't know before.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of travel in circles with really smart people who know a lot about things that some about, right? I've lived with EMTALA my entire career, but things about it I didn't know, and things about the current situation with the guidance from Trump and what they did in the previous administration that I didn't know, and I think people need to know. Her updates on a couple other legal issues coming through the Supreme Court very soon. Planned Parenthood, the Braidwood decision forthcoming. I think these are all things we need to have on our radar that really impact us in our lives as physicians, as advocates, and then really the lives of the people we're treating and the people we're advocating for.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think, good to have her and good to see you and talk to you again, but would wonder if you want to read us out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Today's episode was written by Chris Savage, Dr. Rob Davidson, and me, Miles Baker. Show is produced by Amelia Dillenschneider, Aslan Ibrahim, and Joel Bryson. Music by Annette Somerset at Dune Flower Productions. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and leave us a rating on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Your support helps others discover the podcast. Physicians, your voice matters. As we heard heard about today on the show at the AMA. Good job. But you can join the fight for a better American healthcare by becoming a member of the Committee to Protect Healthcare. Please visit www.committeetoprotect.org to learn more. And for everyone listening, we'd love your feedback. Send us your comments and suggestions to feedback@pageantamerica.org. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.